In 1901, two young women, Eleanor Vance and Charlotte Yale, stepped off the Southern Railroad train in Biltmore Village and into a life of service dedicated to the training of young men and women. Eleanor Vance drew upon her own training as a woodcarver at the Cincinnati Art School, while Charlotte Yale developed her interest in weaving to provide the boys and girls in the village with skills which could enable them to earn a living while being creative. Together, these two quiet, modest women laid the groundwork for three successful manual arts enterprises: Biltmore Estate Industries in Biltmore Village, Biltmore Industries next to the Grove Park Inn, and the Tryon Toy Makers and Woodcarvers in Tryon, North Carolina. Eleanor Vance grew up in a middle-class neighborhood outside Cincinnati, where in the 1890s she attended the Cincinnati Art School for several years, taking classes in design and woodcarving. Searching for a meaningful role in her life, Eleanor moved to Chicago and enrolled in the Moody Bible College. There she became lifelong friends with Charlotte Yale, who had recently attended Oberlin College. Both women planned to become missionaries, possibly in India. But the young women had assumed care for Eleanor's widowed mother, whose doctors recommended a move to a milder climate. After finding Florida disagreeable to all three of them, in 1901 they moved to Asheville and rented a house from George Vanderbilt in Biltmore Village. A group of young boys in the village became fascinated watching Eleanor carve on her back porch, which inspired Eleanor and Charlotte to combine Bible studies along with woodcarving lessons for them. Word of their informal lessons reached Reverend Rodney Swope, hired by George Vanderbilt in 1897 to serve as rector of All Souls Church. Swope soon enlisted the two women to serve as paid instructors at the church. In 1901, the three formed the Biltmore Boys Club, again with an emphasis on Bible studies and woodcarving, both intended to help build character in these young boys. Swope also brought their efforts to the attention of Edith Vanderbilt, who had already displayed an interest in improving the lives of the families living and working on her husband's 140,000-acre estate. In 1905, Edith and George Vanderbilt agreed to fund a new cottage business called Biltmore Estate Industries, which by then included both young men and women. George Vanderbilt provided the industries with a showroom and workspace in Biltmore Village. The building was torn down in 1940, but originally stood on the present site of the J. Jill store on Biltmore Plaza. In this 1908 photo, Charlotte Yale and Eleanor Vance are standing in the doorway. Nell Leip, seated in the wheelchair, worked at Biltmore Estate Industries for years. Her father, James Leip, was superintendent of labor at the Biltmore Estate, but drowned in the devastating 1916 flood. Inside, the young men and women worked at the workbenches provided by the Vanderbilts and were inspired by plaster molds selected for them by Edith Vanderbilt. One of their finest carvers, Nell Leip, can be seen at the far left. Those who sought interests other than woodcarving were able to learn needlepoint and basket weaving. With tools and workspace provided by the Vanderbilts and excellent instruction provided by both Vance and Yale, the woodcarvers advanced quickly. Nearly all their designs were drawn by Eleanor Vance, then transferred using tracing paper to furniture, picture frames, door panels, and book racks. Within a year of their formation in 1905, the Biltmore Estate Industries began selling items to tourists and area residents, including friends sent by Edith Vanderbilt, who also ordered custom pieces for the Biltmore House. Beginning woodcarvers would often be taught their craft on items as simple as this monogrammed walnut bookend on the left. Each piece was juried by Vance and Yale, who decided which items merited display in their gallery. If they progressed as hoped, the carvers would move up to more complicated projects and designs, such as the dogwood bookend on the right, and would earn commissions on their sales. Here on the left is one of Eleanor Vance's surviving drawings of dogwood blossoms intended for a bookend. Alongside it is a similar carved design, either done by Vance or one of the craftsmen or women at the industries. The carvers preferred either walnut or mahogany, woods which were easier to carve than oak and less likely to chip out or splinter. Indicative of the support provided by Edith and George Vanderbilt, in 1905 they arranged for a woodworking shop to be set up in another of their buildings located on the outskirts of Biltmore Village. In addition to equipping the workshop with power saws, shapers, sanders, and lathes, the Vanderbilts hired a woodworking instructor who spent 2 months teaching the young men, including their star pupil, George Arthur, seen here on the far right. Arthur served as the shop foreman from 1910 until 1917. Like the arts and crafts workshops of Gustav Stickley, even though they used power equipment to prepare the wood, a great deal of the work still had to be done by skilled hands. Note here the sanding block, the hand drill, the plane, and the carving chisel on top of the workbench. Major pieces of furniture appear to have been made primarily when commissioned by specific clients, including Edith Vanderbilt, as they rarely surface today. Such examples reflect a variety of furniture styles, ranging from early American to arts and crafts, further supporting the theory that furniture was often designed to match the taste of their individual clients. This picture taken inside the finishing room contains a great deal of information. Here we see 2 young men applying a finish to a pair of arts and crafts style tables, while on the floor behind them are 3 circular tea tables in a more traditional 18th century style. And even though the shelves containing a large number of trays with frets-on sides, for some reason these trays rarely surface today. On the top shelf to the right are 3 nutcrackers, a book rack, and 2 tall candlesticks. Note as well the bowl on the left end of the workbench. Here are 2 other men in the finishing room, polishing completed furniture and a pair of tall candlesticks to a high gloss finish. Again, note the variety of furniture styles which the woodworkers were capable of producing. What we are most likely to discover today are the smaller carved items decorated with Eleanor Vance designs, which were carried out by the woodworkers under the supervision of George Arthur. In addition to Vance's designs, which were inspired by native dogwoods, thistles, and grapevines, the wood carvers also produced a line of popular gollywog hearth brushes and fireplace bellows, which trace their lineage back to England. Among the most popular of these smaller items, which often went home with tourists, were the carved walnut bowls designed by Eleanor Vance. Each bowl was turned on a lathe until the desired shape of the sides and foot was achieved, before it was then sent to the carving room. Vance's designs included oak leaves and acorns, grapes and grape leaves, and dogwood blossoms and berries. The most advanced bowl was this one, which was adorned with 1 or 2 hand-carved squirrels, each holding a tiny acorn in its paws. This pair is adeptly mounted on a bowl designed by Eleanor Vance and decorated with oak leaves and acorns. Since several people would have been involved in the design, forming, carving, and finishing of each piece, the decision was made to have one trademark for the shop branded into each piece, rather than the marks or individuals of the individuals involved. The inspirational word "forward" placed inside a banner was suggested in 1905 by Edith Vanderbilt. It may be found alone or with Biltmore NC beneath it. The crew is very thorough in branding each piece. Rare exceptions would be candlesticks or bookends with felt glued to the underside. As George Arthur gradually assumed the leadership role in the woodworking shop, Eleanor and Charlotte turned their attention to the young women at Biltmore Estate Industries, teaching them skills in needlepoint and sewing. Drawing upon her own experience helping mountain women market their hand-woven coverlets, Edith Vanderbilt suggested that Vance and Yale teach both young men and women how to weave homespun cloth. Although the name might conjure up images of a coarse textile, homespun cloth was actually a very soft, durable, and colorful wool fabric used by tailors to make fashionable clothing for men and women. The Vanderbilts even arranged for Vance and Yale to travel to Ireland to learn the craft of making homespun cloth. Upon their return, Vance and Yale had the woodworkers build a number of oak looms which were installed in the workroom in the back of the gallery in Biltmore Village. There both young men and women were taught how to prepare and dye wool before turning it into thread to be woven into bolts of cloth. On March 6, 1914, after having lunch in their Washington, D.C. home with Edith and their 14-year-old daughter Cornelia, George Vanderbilt collapsed and died. He was just 51. Death was attributed to a blood clot, which may have formed after he had his appendix removed 3 days earlier. As soon became apparent to his widow, the millionaire Vanderbilt was in truth land rich but cash poor, with less than $14,000 in his bank account and a sizable number of money-losing rental properties and investments, including Biltmore Estate Industries. Sensing the inevitable, Eleanor Vance and Charlotte Yale, both then in their 50s, announced that they would be resigning their positions as heads of Biltmore Estate Industries and retiring to Tryon, 40 miles south of Asheville. In their place, George Arthur took over. In 1915, he returned triumphant from the Panama Pacific International Exposition held in San Francisco, where Biltmore Estate Industries was awarded a gold medal for handmade and hand-carved furniture. But then, during the week of July 15, 1916, 3 storms dumped a total of 23 inches of rain on western North Carolina, turning the placid French Broad River into a raging torrent of uprooted trees, homes, bridges, and buildings, which swept through the Biltmore Estate and Biltmore Village. Dozens of people drowned as millions of dollars of property were destroyed in the worst flooding to ever descend on Asheville. Already faced with a personal financial crisis, Edith Vanderbilt was nearly overwhelmed with the task of rebuilding her husband's prized estate, while also raising a rebellious teenage daughter and salvaging her late husband's scattered financial affairs. In order to save the money pit which the Biltmore house had become, Edith negotiated the sale of 90,000 acres of land to the federal government for Pisgah National Forest. She then sliced off additional land to form, with local investors, a development called Biltmore Forest. Eventually, Edith moved to Washington, D.C., where she remarried, leaving Biltmore Estate in the hands of her daughter Cornelia and her son-in-law, Englishman John Cecil. Before leaving, however, in 1917, Edith agreed to sell Biltmore Estate Industries to Frederick Loring Seeley, best known as the designer and manager of the Grove Park Inn. While to outsiders the famed Grove Park Inn seemed a success story, in truth, the partnership between Fred Seeley and his father-in-law, Edwin Wiley Grove, was beginning to crack and crumble. Sensing he might soon be evicted from the hotel he leased from Grove, Fred Seeley envisioned Biltmore Estate Industries as his next career. In the second part of our story, we will watch as Fred Seeley moves the woodworkers and weavers to the buildings he constructs adjacent to the Grove Park Inn. As he does, Fred Seeley shortens the name from Biltmore Estate Industries to Biltmore Industries. And 40 miles south of here, retirement for Eleanor Vance and Charlotte Yale involves a name change for them as well, which we will explore in the third and final installment in this story. Thanks for watching.